Emily's husband James was leaving for the war. He wore his military uniform, carried a small bag over his shoulder, and tried to look brave. But Emily could see the fear in his eyes. David was too young to understand what war meant. He only knew that his father was going somewhere far away. He looked up at James and asked, "Daddy, when will you come home?" James knelt down, held his son's face in his hands, and smiled. "Soon, little man, I promise." Emily knew that promises were dangerous during wartime, but she said nothing. James hugged David, then held Emily tightly. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. There was nothing left to say. The train whistle sounded. James kissed Emily's forehead, picked up his bag, and climbed aboard. Emily watched through the window as the train slowly moved away. David ran beside it, shouting, "Daddy! Daddy!" James pressed his hand against the glass. Emily held her son's hand as long as she could, until the train disappeared beyond the horizon. That was the last morning their family was together. The first few weeks passed slowly. Emily waited for letters every day. Whenever the postman appeared at the end of the road, David would run toward him shouting, "Is there a letter from Daddy?" Sometimes there was nothing. Sometimes there was a short letter written in a hurry. James wrote about the cold, about the long marches, and about how much he missed them. But he never described the terrible things he was seeing. He didn't want his wife to know. Instead, he wrote about home. He wrote about the apple tree in the garden. He wrote about David's favorite wooden toy. He wrote about the little house they would repair when he returned. Emily kept every letter in a small wooden box beside her bed. She read them again and again whenever she missed him. Then one morning, the letters stopped. Weeks became months. Months became years. The war grew worse. Emily heard explosions in distant towns. Refugees passed through the village carrying everything they could save. Some families had no homes left. Some children had no parents. Every evening, Emily closed the windows before darkness came and held David close whenever the sound of aircraft appeared in the sky. David slowly stopped asking when his father would return. Perhaps he was beginning to understand. Or perhaps he was simply afraid of the answer. One night, an air raid began. The sky turned red in the distance. Emily took David into the basement and held him against her chest while the walls shook. David covered his ears. "Mommy, will Daddy come back and stop the war?" he whispered. Emily closed her eyes because she didn't know how to answer. She kissed his forehead and said, "Your daddy is trying to come home." That was the only hope she had left. Then, one rainy afternoon, a military vehicle stopped outside Emily's house. A uniformed officer stepped out carrying a small envelope. Emily saw him walking toward the door and immediately understood. Her hands became cold. She didn't want to open the door. She wanted to run. She wanted the world to stop. But eventually, she opened it. The officer looked at her with sadness and said that James had been missing since a battle many months earlier. There was no confirmation that he was dead. There was only the word, "missing." Emily held the envelope against her chest. It wasn't an answer. It was something worse. It was uncertainty. Years passed. The war eventually ended. People celebrated in the streets. Church bells rang. Soldiers returned home. Families hugged each other at railway stations. But Emily stood among the crowds looking at every soldier's face, searching for James home. There was a long silence. Then David looked toward the old garden outside the window. The apple tree was still standing. The same tree James had written about in his letters all those years ago. David walked outside and placed his father's photograph beneath it. He whispered, "Dad, you never made it home. But we never forgot you." And perhaps that is the cruelest thing about war. The battlefield does not end when the guns become silent. For some people, the war continues for the rest of their lives. It lives inside the empty chair at the dinner table. Inside the unopened bedroom. Inside the photograph kept inside a drawer. Inside the mother who still listens for footsteps at the door. Inside the child who grows up wondering what his father would have looked like today. Millions of soldiers went to war believing they were fighting for a better future. But behind every soldier was a family waiting. A wife waiting. A mother waiting. A child waiting. And when the war ended, not everyone came home. Some returned with scars on their bodies. Others returned with memories they could never explain. And millions never returned at all. So when we look at old photographs from World War II, we should remember something. Those were not just soldiers. They were fathers. They were husbands. They were sons. They were brothers. They had favorite songs. They had unfinished dreams. They had people waiting for them. And somewhere, in countless homes around the world, someone kept a light burning for a person who would never walk through the door again. War may end on a calendar. But for the people who lose someone they love, it never truly ends.